Thank you, and thanks. Thanks for putting this on. This is a really great idea, and I'm really glad we're able to do it, and I'm really, really happy and honored to be part of this. What I want to start with is just I guess, the question of why history? Why does history matter? Why get involved in history? And for me, the answer to that question really comes out of the experience of going to Rome for the first time and walking into a city where, quite literally, you're walking through levels of history that go back for 2,000 years. And what fascinated me about that experience was trying to figure out exactly what had happened and how we can slow down the passage of thousands of years into moments that are understandable, moments that look like the moments that we experience. And if we do that, what do we get out of that? What do we learn, and what can we see? And so as I've been working as a professor, the goal that I've tried to do in my research, but also in my teaching and in my conversations, is to get a sense for what happens in that time that we like to conflate into massive amounts of condensed space. Roman history lasts for nearly 2,000 years. Many of us, when we're first exposed to Roman history, we are exposed to all of Roman history in a week. We lose the human experience when we do that. We lose the experience of actually living through a time period and living through a set of events. And that loss is really significant, because one thing that is quite important when you slow history down is the realization that the people living through these events, they don't know the end of the story. They're in the middle of the story, and they don't know where it's going to result. They don't know what is going to come from it, and therefore they cannot make the same choices that we would if we knew the ending. I'll give you an example of this that I think is one that I'm still playing with a little bit intellectually. So in 1949-ish, the science fiction author Isaac Asimov wrote a history, or a future history, in a trilogy of books called the Foundation series. And what Asimov does is he uses the decline and fall of the Roman Empire as a model for a galactic empire that will also decline and fall. And Asimov has a very specific idea of what makes barbarism in that context. Barbarism for Asimov is a society that loses the ability to make carbon-free power through nuclear reaction and loses the ability to engage in interstellar transportation. Now, if it's 1950, that makes a lot of sense, right? That's the beginning of the space age. It's the beginning of the nuclear age. Progress looks like nuclear power and space travel. The biggest rocket that the United States ever launched was the Saturn V. The last time we launched it was in 1973. Nuclear power in the United States, the average nuclear power plant right now is 37 years old. We are not building nuclear power plants to replace the ones that are going away. By Asimov's measure, we are in decline. We are in an age of barbarism. No one has even been out of low Earth orbit since 1972. But are we in an age of decline? When you look around and you look at your phone, or you look at your computer, or you look at the fact that I have a Fitbit on my wrist that has more computing power than the things Asimov imagined 12,000 years in the future in 1950, we don't see decline, we see progress. And that's our perspective, because we're living in the middle of a story. But what happens in 70 years? What happens if burning carbon and creating pollution creates an inhospitable world? What happens if we don't have enough food? What happens if Facebook destroys our political culture and we fall into civil war? Will we look at the 2010s and say, that was progress? Or will we look back at what Asimov said in the 50s and say, no, actually, that's the future we should have had. We were in decline all along. So I bring this up because as a Roman historian, there are so many moments in these 2,000 years where you see that, where you see people making choices that make a whole lot of sense at that moment because they don't know the story and they don't know where they are in it. And so what does that have to do with us? Well, what I've been working on most recently is a history of the Roman Republic. And the Roman Republic, of course, is probably not as familiar to you as the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire lasts for about 1,500 years. The Republic lasts for 500 years. But no one remembers the fall of the Republic because the Empire is very successful in picking up where the Republic left off. But the Roman Republic provides the model for what our republic is. Our system of government is a republic. And when the Founding Fathers sat down to figure out what they wanted to create, they looked at Rome. What you see in the Roman Republic is for 300 years, this system of government is a free system of government, a system of government that makes the Republic work and succeed and expand and incorporate new citizens and do it peacefully. For more than 300 years, there is no political violence in Rome that results in injury or death. And then all of a sudden, in the 130s BC, there is a political murder. And what Romans immediately think is, this is horrible, we don't know this, we've never seen this, we don't have a way to understand this, but this was a one-off. You know, this was just, it was a mistake. It was something that we recover from. And there isn't any more political violence for another 10 years. Then there is, and then there's another generation before there's more political violence. Now, we know that story. We know where that story ends. We know that story ends with the Republic dying and an emperor taking power. They didn't. 25 years without political violence is a very long time. The average Roman, if they make it past 5 years old, which most didn't, but if they did, they live to be about 50. If you have political violence every 25 years, you see it maybe once, maybe twice in your life. And what Romans believed was their republic was very old and very successful, and it wouldn't go away. And so Romans fall into a pattern of assuming the republic is always going to be there. And we can make choices based on whatever it is that we want at that moment, and if it's damaging to the republic, or it breaks a political norm, or it causes violence, or someone is hurt, well, it's actually really important to me that this policy comes about, so I endorse that. I think probably this looks familiar to you. In the United States now, this is the same way we think, right? We don't like a particular Supreme Court justice. When that justice steps down, either we're happy or we're sad when that justice is replaced. And maybe we're happy if there's a filibuster that prevents that justice from being replaced if we don't like the political party in charge. Maybe. But what's the consequence of that? And what's the consequence of making those kinds of decisions all the time? Where you say, I want to declare an emergency because I'm not getting what I want. Okay, that sets a precedent. And when that precedent is set, it's very hard to walk it back. And is it worth the damage that we cause? Now, when we think in these short-term ways, we're behaving like Romans did in the late Republic. And this is because Romans didn't know where the story was going. They didn't know what moment in that story they were. And they didn't know that making a decision to pursue something for short-term benefit at the expense of their political system would destroy their political system. Romans assumed it would be there forever. Are we making that same mistake? So what I want to do to you, or what I want to charge your generation with, is speaking for our republic, speaking for our political system, speaking for the conditions that make it possible for us to have conversations from the left or from the right or from the crazy middle. But that political system is valuable. And my generation and the generation before me has stopped speaking for that political system. We stopped speaking for the republic. We assumed it would always be there. It will not always be there. We don't know what story we're in. We don't know what its end will be. But your generation has the opportunity to step forward and speak for our republic. And be sure that the political system that we inherit is the political system that our children will inherit, and their children will inherit. Maybe the system is one that recovers. Maybe our story is one where we are still progressing. But it's up to us to decide what that ending is, and it's up to us to be aware of the fact that there are choices we can make to make that ending what we want it to be. And so that's what I see when I look out to the future. Tremendous opportunity to make this society better, to make this world better, to make our politics better. But only if we recognize the lessons that we can learn from the past and do it in a way where we step back and realize that every choice that someone made in the past was made without knowing what it would lead to. We're in the middle of a story. Take charge of it, own it, and change it in the way you want to change it. It's your world. Seize it. Thank you.